so much for joining in. I'm Dr. Judy Rosenberg, founder of the Psychological Healing Center and the creator of the mindmap system for healing from childhood wounds, and specifically tonight from narcissistic abuse. So I want to describe what is narcissistic abuse from a mind map perspective, because there's so much information out there about narcissism, and so many people know so much about it. And then there are terms and definitions and symptoms and lists and lists and lists of things to watch out for, and lists and lists of symptoms. But I kind of want to put it together for you in a very systematized way so that you can understand how narcissism is born from a causal perspective, why people get embroiled with people who are narcissists, what makes for the backdrop to the abuse, how does this even begin? And so I'm going to do some mind mapping, and specifically, I really want to hear from you. I want to hear your experiences in life, how you have been hurt, maybe even how you hurt people, which of course I think is a very courageous thing to do, is to self-reflect and self-correct, something that you're going to learn narcissists have a very, very hard time doing. And if you're able to at least look at yourself from the point of view of your impact on other people, chances are that you're heading in the right direction, away from being abusive and away from walling up your symptoms, and maybe even trying to connect to other people. So one of the things that I want to mention to everyone is that I've been working very, very hard on videotaping my new series titled Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. I'm very excited to present this to you. It's not quite done. I'm in post-production right now. You're welcome to call me at the Psychological Healing Center, because I'm happy to tell you about it. And then we could talk about whether you're going to be doing this as a journey on your own, because it is a complete video instructional guide on how to heal, or whether you want to pair this with services with one of the wonderful people on my team, or whether perhaps you want to join a webinar. And I'm planning on having one of those so that we can go through the process together. We can learn from each other. We can understand deeper how we get embroiled in systems gone wrong, relationships gone wrong, and what to do to heal ourselves so that we are not suffering from the after effects of this type of trauma and the complex PTSD, which is old, unprocessed feelings, wounds from the past that are re-triggered in the now, often replayed in the now as in a what the Freud repetitive fashion. And we want to have a deep understanding of this, because my knowledge base is that's to me, and I want to say to you that the more you know about this, the less vulnerable you are to being fooled by it, and the more hardy you are to putting up boundaries so that you're not penetrated by other people who take advantage of your sharing, giving, warm-hearted nature, and then proceed to vampire all your light, all your resources, because that's what narcissists like to do. So first off, narcissism is on a continuum. I use it as a label because it's the way people describe things. They, if you're talking about anxiety, then you use the label anxiety. But when I'm talking about narcissism, I'm really, really talking about a system gone wrong, beginning with mother-infant disconnect, father-infant disconnect, and specifically what is born out of that. Because when you're disconnected from your mother, your primary caregiver, and father, when mother and father are disconnected, or when your primary caregivers are not connected to each other, when there's no sense of family structure and no sense of safety and security in the family, it leaves one really, really vulnerable to emotional wounding. So starting with the system gone wrong, we have a situation where parents, either one parent or both parents or caregivers, they just have no empathy, okay, or low empathy. And this is very frustrating because what does a child need most of all is to be connected and cared about. And in a narcissistic system, it's quite the opposite. Instead of caring for the child and putting that child as number one, it is turned around 180 degrees, and now it's mommy dearest or daddy dearest or caregiver dearest who is number one. And this could take on many, many forms, and we'll share about that so that you can sort of see the fallout material of this. So let me give you an example. So if a parent just doesn't feel anything for you, well, that's not a good thing. Imagine if your feet were numb and you couldn't feel the rocks beneath your feet or the heat from the floor, or if you stubbed your toes and you didn't feel pain. Well, if you don't feel anything, you can cause great injury to yourself. With parents, if they don't feel anything, if there's no feedback loop between their impact on the child, specifically now you being that person that's been impacted, well then what's to keep them from hurting you, ignoring you, using you, setting you up to be one of their agents like a flying monkey? What's to keep them from emotionally making you feel as though you're not important, and even emotionally making you feel that you shouldn't have even been born? Okay, so we're going to get into all of this because I'm already beginning to mind map the process of the unfolding of the wounding. So let's go to panel number one and take a look from a mind map perspective. What is narcissistic abuse? So if you look at the background, you see the light, and that light represents who we can become if we're just left to thrive, if we're not shadowed over by wounds, if we're not limited by parental intervention that hurts us. So you can see that the shadows over it represent those wounds like physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, neglect and smothering, emotional manipulations and betrayals. Okay, so those are all the wounds. In the case of narcissistic abuse, the prominent one is the abuse of, I don't care about you. I don't have the feeling to feel for you. You're not my number one. I'm my number one, and you come last, I come first. And so what do you think that's going to do to you if you're an unhappy recipient of all of this? So if we move to panel number two, you could see that you're going to have a reaction to this. And as you can see, these panels are metaphors for the storyboard of the mind map. So this is a metaphor for a cracked lens of perception. It's a metaphor for our psyche beginning to crack up. It's a metaphor for basically separating from our caregivers. So it's a broken panel. You could see the shattered glass. It's broken. So what happens when you're ignored, when you're abused, when you're not made to feel important, special, number one? It breaks you, okay? And when it breaks you, you have reactions. So maybe you start to cry, or maybe you start to curl up in a little ball, or maybe you get stomach aches or back aches, or perhaps you give up hope and you just don't do anything after a while, or even worse. Dr. John Bowlby, who's the father of attachment theory, studied children whose parents were either killed in the war or they were separated from the children, and babies left in the crib untouched and uncared for failed to thrive, and some of them died just from the fact that they were not touched and stimulated. Because what happens is the baby goes inward and inward and inward and shuts down and stops eating and stops trying, because it's really the parents or the outside world that calls the baby out to engage with the world. But if there's no engagement, then there's a big shutdown. And on the far end of things, a failure to thrive can cause physical death or a real emotional death and an emotional numbing. So you could see the formation of this narcissistic injury, this lack of empathy, this lack of caring and attention, and it begins to shut the person down. The walls begin to build, and the messages begin to encode. So what are some of the common encodings? So imagine if you've been treated as though you're not important, then you're going to have core beliefs like, I'm not special, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. And these are some of the things that I see in the treatment room. Now, with the person that's formed a defense mechanism against this kind of treatment, you might see the very opposite. So instead of that person presenting as not special or not lovable, they'll present as very special and very entitled. But the problem is that underneath this house of cards is a feeling of emptiness. Okay, just to tell you what it sounds like when I'm talking to patients in the treatment room, people might say something like, you know, Dr. Judy, underneath this huffing and puffing and impressive person that I present myself to be is really a shadow of a person. I'm just a house of cards, and it's caving in on me. And I don't want people to know what's really inside, because I'm scared. I'm scared that I'm going to be busted, that there's nothing really much in there. And all this huffing and puffing is just for show and distraction, so that people wouldn't be able to read just how guilty and shame-ridden I am, and how vulnerable I am, and how insecure I am, and how low down I feel. And it's amazing to me, because I see all kinds of people from all kinds of cultures and all kinds of socioeconomic positions in life. And what's always astounding is when you see the outer crust, and it's so beautiful. Their suits are beautiful. Their dresses are beautiful. Their presentation is beautiful, but scratch the surface and there's just a lot of emptiness in there. Okay, so why is that so? Because we form from the outside in. We're not forming from the inside out, because as babies, we've got to draw from the outside world. And if our parents are not nurturing us, attuning to us, and mirroring us, then what are we making of ourselves? We're sitting there going like, who am I? What am I? And so if you don't have that feedback loop from your parents, then you don't have anything to build on. And now it can get even worse when your parents inflate you and tell you how wonderful you are and how special you are without your earning it. So imagine now your parents are giving you the crown jewels and the crown status, but you haven't done anything to really earn it. So deep down inside, you know that you didn't earn it, but yet you're getting the accolades. But even worse, if you don't march to your parents' drums, then all of those goodies, accolades, rewards, material possessions, money, whatever it is, compliments, are going to be pulled out from under your feet. Okay, so it's conditional. Little Johnny, little Mary, little Susie, you're great as long as mommy says you're great. So if you don't behave and you don't fulfill on mommy's or daddy's agendas, you're not great. So do you see the puppet effect here? That the kid is under the control of their parents. So who's the cause? Well, It's a multi-generational thing, because if the parents are behaving like that, chances are that they come from wounded families and their families are wounded and nobody bothered to heal. So at the end of the road, now it's tag, you're it, because you're in a position of being the recipient of all of these woundings. And the only way out of what I refer to the double dungeon of darkness is to do your own healing. So if you look at the mind map, I'm going to describe it to you from a global perspective. If you look at the 9 panels, you will see panels 1, 2, and 3. That's the first piece of the work of the mind map, the encoding part, the wounds, the reactions, and the encodings, which are the negative core beliefs. So that's part 1. We've got to look at what happened, specifically what kinds of wounds were unfortunately played out in childhood, the reactions to those wounds, the encodings of the wounds, and then we take a look at the impact of that on you, your financial life, your spiritual life, your sexual life, your emotions, your relationships, your work patterns. Okay, so if you look at chaos, then you see that everything's coming undone. Why? Because for a solid family to be, you've got to have a united front. You have to have bonds that are solid. You have to have solid family support system. You can't just be all over the place and disenfranchised, because if you have that kind of a family system, then you can see that people are flying off the ladder here. They're left, right, up, down, and there's no orientation. So this lack of orientation, this lack of a cohesive DNA strand is representative of a lack of cohesive self. And when people don't have a sense of cohesion within their own being, then they are subject to emotional dysregulation. They're subject to flying off into a rage. They could be subject to self-harm. They could be subject to cognitive impairment. So you could see that the chaos created by this lack of bonding, this inability to hold the family structure together, has some dire consequences. And nobody likes to be in chaos. I don't want to be in chaos. That's why I try to keep my house really organized, because it helps me think better. I like everything in place. It just works better to be organized. So sometimes what people do when they don't feel together, they feel too vulnerable, is they could do a few things. Okay, so one thing they could do is to wall up. Okay, so I'm not feeling good. I'm going to put a wall around me. I'm going to defend myself. Now on panel number 5, I'm going to erect something that Otto Kernberg, who was an object relations, I believe he's still alive, object relations oriented psychologist, talked about the fragile inner self, and he called the narcissistic defense as a defense against this vulnerable, fragile, almost like a borderline dysregulated sense of self. And because it's so fragile, people have to build that wall, and that's the narcissistic defense. And now we're going full circle back to, why don't they have empathy? Well, because they've been hurt. See, if you hurt your fingers or you hurt a part of your body, you might get a callus or a scar. And this is similar to it on a psychological level. If you've been hurt, then you might get a callus. You might start to wall up. So that's one possible outcome. So again, I'm just reviewing for you so you understand, why do people defend that way? Because they've been hurt. They've been either spoiled and then demeaned, devalued, destroyed, or controlled, or they've been emotionally neglected. They didn't have all of those, I call them the emotional goodies of eye contact and skin contact and connection and so on. So you could see that it's really, really hard to form a sense of self when you don't have somebody from the outside, like a mom or a dad or caregiver, giving you feedback that, yes, you're lovable. Yes, we want you. Yes, you're special. Yes, you're funny. Yes, we care. Okay, so I think we have a call, and thank you so much. Hi. And what name would you like me to call?
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for
Hi,
calling.
Clark.
I'm sorry?
Yes, I spoke to you once, probably a couple of years ago. I spoke with you. So
Oh,
really enjoy your programming.
thank you.
You've really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I think I realized, a few years ago that I was raised by a narcissistic mother and a stepfather, and then a father who was very, maybe, I don't know, he was the complete opposite of my mother. He was very submissive and that type of thing. But anyway, I just don't know, how to quite fill that emptiness. My mother seemed like she was always very explosive with her temper and very physically abusive, you might say, and she always had problems with her mother. She was always complained about the relationship with her mother and her sisters, and my mother seemed like she tried up until my sister and I were maybe in our early teens and weren't quite as cute and didn't draw the attention that we used to. But anyway, then she left my father and ran off with an alcoholic narcissist and gave all her love and time and money to him, and kind of left us hanging, it seems like. And it's kind of confusing to me because sometimes I hear people say, that initial contact or whatever with a mother is so important when we're very small. But it seems like I had that when I was young. My mother read to me and took care of me when I was sick and all that. But it was when I was in my early teens, it seemed like she abandoned me, and it's a little confusing to me. So I don't know, if there's a chance of healing up from.
Yeah, let me address that because there are no easy answers here. Okay, so in your case, you're saying that this did not happen to you in the first few years of life. Actually, life was pretty good in the first few years of life, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And see, mothers with little tiny babies sometimes they could be okay with them because they haven't really separated and individuated. And so they could be their little tiny little doll or their little toy. You see, it's this objectification of the child, because if the mother's not well, let's remember that your mother was an alcoholic, yes? Is that correct?
Oh, I'd say so, yes.
Okay, and then she ran off alcoholic. All right, so already we have indicators that there's what I refer to as a hole in the soul. And so maybe when you were an infant, you kind of filled that for her because you were this cute little infant and you'd smile and she could smile back. So there's the mirroring and the attunement. But as soon as you started getting bigger and wanting to separate and individuate from her, as soon as you were attempting to have a mind of your own, a voice of your own, a life of your own, as soon as she wasn't the number one and the idealized mother, because I'm sure you had other people in your life, that might have caused her to feel narcissistically injured by you, okay? Not that you did anything, just by virtue of the fact that you were trying to separate and individuate and have your own life. That separation may have, and again, I don't know the facts, but I'm just kind of putting the puzzle pieces together as you're giving them to me. So now she goes off with somebody else that she feels maybe can supply her better. After all, they can drink together and have fun together and laugh
Yeah.
together, right? And now you're kicked
Exactly.
to the
Yeah.
curb. Right. You're kicked to the curb and you're thinking, what the hell? So can you see how you were up and then boom, you're let down?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
That's
Indeed.
this is a big fall. It's not like you were gently pushed out of the nest and you made new friends and they encouraged you to be independent. It's just like there was no healthy separation, individuation. She just decided one fine day that your stepfather was the better supply for her. And so, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
you're out. Okay. And so, this
That's right.
big
That's right.
fall off, get it? This big fall off the cliff is a narcissistic injury. Imagine you think, oh, I'm great, I'm special, I'm lovable. This, like, what? I'm not
Mm-hmm.
substituted?
Yeah.
So, that in and of itself. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. I spent a lot of my adult life, my teens and the years of my adult life trying to win back the love and approval of my mother, and I could never get it back, and I also spent a lot of time in my relationships with women, somehow setting up that same dynamic. And, I'm just becoming somewhat aware of my experience and behavior, and I'm just I'm trying to educate myself a bit more about what happened and trying to find ways to heal up a little bit, and it's a difficult road. It really is.
It
lonely
really
kind of a road.
I was going to get into it, but I'll get into it with you so you can understand through your own experience that the person that you bonded to, okay, initially she played back, she engaged back, but then she disengaged, and not on your terms, on her terms. And this creates what I call a trauma bond because it's a one-way street, you see? Okay. So she's bonded to you, or I should say, you're bonded to her, but she's not bonded back to you. She doesn't care. Right. She's not as invested. She's not as invested or not invested in you the way that you are invested in her. And this is very imbalanced because the mom or the caregiver is supposed to be as invested, if not more invested, in her offspring, correct?
That's right.
But if that's not the case and she's leaving and you're pining, okay, because that's what it's setting up. This trauma bond is like a kind of like a pining effect. And you could hear it in our music, like, please don't go, these songs are coming into my mind, and they're stretching our bandwidth, and now we're feeling abandoned, and we're begging, I beg you, please don't go. And your mom's going, and then your bond to her is being stretched and stretched and stretched, and you don't know how to get her back. So then it starts with this horrible chasing. You're chasing her. That doesn't work. And then you do a true what the Freud. Okay, so what do I mean by that? You're incomplete. The file is not closed with your mother. It's in like an open-ended file. So now you go and you find somebody else that's probably as unavailable as your mother on some level. Okay, so now you've replicated the trauma bond, not because you're stupid, not because you're deliberately trying to hurt yourself, but because you're trying to heal the original disconnect. Okay, so your unconscious mind is saying, let's play it again, let's do this again, but this time I'm going to get it right, and I'm going to chase the golden chalice. And when that person turns around and says, I love you too, then all is good in the world. You see?
Yes.
With me
Yes.
so far? Okay. So problem is that you probably pick another lack of empathy person. Somebody else is missing the empathy chip, as I like to refer to it. And so you're playing the whole thing out, right? They're not giving you any emotional goodies. And once again, you're bonded to them because you're trying to fix it. You're trying to have a happy ending here with what didn't happen with your mother. And they too leave you or betray you or play hard to get or, eventually demean, devalue, destroy, and make your life so hard that you can't stand it anymore. And then you're kicked again. You're kicked again in the abandonment wound. You see that?
Oh yes, I've experienced it many times.
Right. Okay. So not only do you see it, but you feel it. And so what happens here is that you get sick. Okay. You're stretched to the limit. Your cortisol level goes up because you're in that state of incompletion. You're in a state of waiting, backaches, neck aches, tension, anxiety, the insecurity of the attachment because there's no real attachment, and the depression that you've been kicked to the curb once again, and then cycle through. Okay, so that's why I do these YouTube shows, because it's almost like I don't know what's going on, but it seems from my perspective, but then again, people call me specifically for this, healing from narcissistic abuse and other childhood wounds. Seems like it's pretty epidemic on some level. Okay, so it may not be a full-blown DSM, diagnostic and statistical manual markers of narcissism, but again, it's on a continuum, and people seem to be suffering. And what I see in my office is really sad. I see people who are so tired and they're so emotionally spent, and they give. And they think that they're going to cure the person by being loving and kind and generous emotionally and generous with their money and people please and baby them and so on. And right? Have you done that?
Oh, yes. It's all I've known how to do, really.
Okay, so you want to do that because nobody wants to feel hopeless, and everybody wants a pathway back to the people that they love, and they figure, look, I'll just do whatever they want. I'll please them, and they're going to finally get it that I'm so wonderful and loving and kind that they'll come around. But the problem is the hole in the soul, okay? So what is the hole in the soul? Is that, right, that empty place that is so injured that it doesn't get filled up. So if you give them love, you give them money, you give them compliments, you give them anything, and they just want more, because as I say in my sessions, they can't ingest it properly. They're not digesting it because it's just like food that just flows right through your body and doesn't get processed and utilized as nutrients in your body. Okay, it just passes right through you. The narcissist isn't even getting nourished by this, and then they're left with that empty feeling again, and then they need to fill it. So here we go: drugs, sex, rock and roll, new relationships. Pick a nice guy like you to leech off of. You get sick, they feel better for a minute, they're addicted to the narcissistic high that you're giving them, you're addicted to the molecules of love that they may give you every once in a while, which is the intermittent or partial reinforcement that pumps your dopamine level up and makes you feel like, ooh, maybe they do love me after all. Okay. And here it goes again. It's just this really depleting cycle until you start having a paradigm shift. Okay. And that's what the mind map is designed to do, is to help people to have a new way of seeing and a new way of being, and to get out of the system gone wrong, and to understand that this trauma bond, which they call love, it's not love. It's an addictive type of obsession. It's that pining that I was talking about. It's certainly because love, what's love? You tell me, what's love? What is true love?
Oh, wow. I don't know if I can answer that, to be honest with you.
Okay. But how do you know that you're, like you've seen movies, how do you know somebody is loving you and not using you?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I just don't know.
But that is so telling that you haven't tasted that yet. Okay, so thank you for saying the truth. You don't know. Why don't you know? Because probably you haven't lived in panel number 789, which is the paradigm shift and the idea of synergy. Okay, look at panel number 7, where the orbs come together, and that's a metaphor for 1 + 1 is greater than 2. You haven't had that. You had a mother, and plus you became less than. You had a father, a stepfather, plus you, less than. You had relationships plus you, less than. So you never really got the experience of being with somebody in a way where you felt enhanced. And I really love the definition of love that goes something like, it's about caring and sharing. It's about supporting somebody's psycho-spiritual growth. It's about making sacrifices. It's about not abandoning the self and putting the other person so far ahead that, you become a shell of a person. That's not it. That's called the people pleasing, whatever you want to put that. It's really about first of all, you want to invest in the right person. Okay, if you have a hole in the soul, then you're either going to people please and be dysregulated because you're giving too much, or you're going to suck because you're a vampire, one or the other. And I'm talking about the extremes of the system gone wrong. So so what do? You're kind of behind the 8 ball. Your mother didn't pump all this love and nurturance into you. So now what do you do? First of all, you have to process the anger, the betrayal, the sadness your parents left you with. So basically, you've got to empty out the psychological poison, okay? Which is hard because you feel empty enough. So now I'm telling you, sorry, I know you're already feeling not so full, but now you're going to even empty out more because you got to empty out the poison. Okay. So we start there.
Yeah.
Once you empty out the poison, you have to put a fence around yourself so that you're not letting in the bad, but you're also not keeping out the good. Once you do that, you have to really selectively allow people in who are going to be nurturing, or philosophies in that are nurturing, or wisdom masters that are nurturing. You have to let in the good and keep out the bad. And it's a slow build. So, like anything, you're putting in the nutrients. I'm now on panel 8, okay? Recoding. So you asked me, how do you do it? Oh my God, behind the 8 ball. So how do you do it? Self-care, recoding. So instead of coding yourself with narcissists that are going to take and bring you down, you get with people who are on the same path, that have the same ethics, the same values, and so on. Okay, so I know I have another call, but thank you for your questions and your comments, because it's allowed me to really illustrate the system gone wrong. And please
sure.
reach out.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Good night. And I think we do have another call. Is that right?
We did, but they hung up, but they called back a couple times. So call back in if you're trying to get a hold of
I'm ready for you.
Oh,
so, call back.
Let's try now. Here they come.
Okay.
Nope, they hung up again. They're calling from, looks like they're calling from the UK, so they may be having a hard time calling in. So.
Okay, I know that's a lot of numbers to punch in. I hope I'll
Right.
make it worth your time. Keep punching away. Okay, so I hope that you guys are learning something because, again, darkness and the light. When you're in the dark, you're in your unconscious self. When you're unconscious, you're at the effect. That's why I call my book Be the Cause, which everyone is welcome to a PDF copy of. Okay, and if you want an actual hard copy of it, go to Amazon.com and punch in Be the Cause, and you can have that. And soon I'm going to have all nicely edited and post-production, nicely done healing from narcissistic abuse. I put a lot of energy and effort into this so that you can have a complete system of healing. You can do it yourself, although I always think it's best to pair the process with one of our therapists so that you can talk to somebody and have somebody to bounce the feelings off of and clarify and so on. But this is intended as a psychoeducational healing course. And you're welcome to call me about it. And I want to start getting people eventually in the webinar format so we can make it interesting, learn from each other, and of course invite people to do this process at a fee that's less than doing individual therapy with me or one of the staff members. So please inquire about that, and I'll have more information about that. And that was a really tough project, and I'm glad that I'm in post-production. So this is the fun part, making it look really sharp and making it user-friendly for you. Okay, so if we could have that call back, that would be awesome. If not, maybe somebody else wants to call. I do hope that people are getting it, that this is not just narcissism is envy and grandiosity and feeling like you want to rage against something. These are symptoms, but I want to get again to that system gone wrong, the inception part of it, and you can see how horribly it unravels. So maybe there's another call that wants to come in. I'll be happy to talk to you. Are there any questions in the chat room?
No questions, a lot of chatter, but anybody in the chat room, please, if you have a question for Dr. Judy, go ahead and ask it, and I'll read it to her myself.
Thank you, Tony. And I think that unless you've been through this, it's really, really difficult to explain it to other people because nobody hit you necessarily, nobody name called you necessarily, although that sometimes is a part of it. And so they're also great at putting up a wonderful social front. So some people who are lacking empathy may be, let's say, communal narcissists. And what is a communal narcissist? I just started hearing about this as a person who acts as if they're wise masters and they're kind and generous and intelligent and they're leaders, except that they lack empathy. Okay? And I don't care how good a therapist you are or how good you are at helping people, if you really lack the empathy chip and you don't care and you're not in it with the right consciousness, then people are going to feel it. And you can only fool people for so long. And it's just not a good idea to sign up with someone who doesn't have a bandwidth of caring. So with that said, it's just so important that you break it down, break the system down, know how you have become vulnerable to the system, know why. I want to get a little bit more into that toxic bond, which I started getting into with our last caller. So it's a one-way street bond, and it hurts. It hurts when you're bonded to somebody that's not bonded to you. It's dangerous because you're investing your emotions, your money, your property, your sexuality, your ideas, and so on. They don't care. So for them, you're just great supply. And then when they're done with you, there's no conversation. They just might very well kick you to the curb. We're done. Thank you very much. You know, it reminds me of, you know, what's that word? Slam, bam, thank you, ma'am. It's like that. And leaving you feeling high and dry. So this is again a repeat of the original wound of mother-infant disconnect and father-infant disconnect, and a replay of this in the next relationship and the next relationship. And it's really, really serious. It tears at the fabric of your life. It's really dangerous for your psyche. It can lead to high anxiety and depression. It can lead to suicidal thoughts. It can really push a person over the edge. And then it takes a real toll on your body, of course, the psychosomatic piece of narcissistic abuse, where your body is just being ripped apart because every fiber in you is going forward toward the person, but you're not getting anything back. So there's a depletion. And I don't have to tell you how this plays out with financial narcissistic abuse, because if you're a giving person, you're the perfect person for the taker. So they may convince you that there's a great deal out there. That might end up being a Ponzi scheme or some kind of a fraudulent situation. They may convince you to lend them money, and then of course they have no intention to give it back, and the excuses, and then they get angry at you. You ever had a situation where the person got angry at you when you asked for your own money back or your own property back? I certainly have. It's laughable. Wasn't then, but looking back at it, it's like, wait a minute. I'm asking for the money that's mine back. And then suddenly you see this person up in arms like, wow, I can't believe you're putting all this pressure on me. I told you that I'm having a really hard time. So, okay, sometimes people have a hard time, but what about the offer of, thank you so much for lending me this money. I can't pay it back as I promised, but I would like to do payment plans, okay? So that would be the opposite of the narcissist who just wants to make you feel guilty for asking for your own property or money back. So I'm hoping that you see the difference between somebody who's genuinely stressed out and says, I acknowledge it. I'm so sorry. Let's work it out. I'll come up with it. I'll pay you slowly, as long as they keep their word. Okay, so it's these extreme situations. And I have so many examples from people that I have met both personally and people that I've worked with, what it feels like. Somebody was, I think there's another question here in the chat room. I'll go for that. So what is the question?
Yes, I have somebody asking. They say, you often talk about emptiness when you refer to the feeling of not getting needs met as a child. What do you actually mean by emptiness, and what is the opposite of that?
Okay, so you know that word fulfillment, when you feel connection, you feel like your emotional stomach is full. When mommy smiles at the baby and the baby feels the attention, and then the baby can respond, and then they can fill themselves on the love. The emptiness is when you can't turn to your mom. I call it the double dungeon of darkness effect. Can't turn to your mom because there's nobody there. There's nobody home. Either she's an alcoholic, or she's away, or she just doesn't care, or some form of that. Okay, can't turn to dad because he's not there either. So it's empty. Again, like, who am I? What am I? Am I worth something? It's scary. It's dark. It's dark in there, because to have a sense of I'm secure, somebody cares, someone's home emotionally, I have access to somebody. That's the fulfillment, okay? And when it's dark in there, then you go to other relationships that are also unfulfilling, just like what I say in my book, parents set the bar. So if they set a low bar, you're going to find low bar people, and they're not nourishing either. And so you're not fulfilled. So then if you have a propensity to go for drugs, sex, rock and roll, as I like to generically refer to it, those are the hole in the soul fillers. And those are indications that you feel empty because you don't like how you feel. So you fill it, but you're not filling it with relationship. You're not filling it with meaningfulness. You're not filling it with a nice, warm human connection. Okay, I hope that answers it for you. So I want to leave everybody with the thought that this does not have to go as a permanent scar on your psyche. Healing is possible. You need a specialist. You need an expert that will lead you from, through to healing. And any old therapist won't do. A therapist who's just full of knowledge about terms and so on won't do, because you really need somebody who's going to dig deep down in there and identify your childhood wounds, how you reacted, what you made them to mean, and dismantle all of this psychoviral effect on your being. So you need really somebody that can help you journey through this and release the psychological toxins. So please reach out to me. My video, Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, is coming along and should be ready soon. Contact me about it and we could discuss your healing through the video itself, or if you want to pair it with some therapy with one of our staff members or myself, or if you want to get in one of the webinars that are going to be forming very soon. I welcome your call. Psychological Healing Center. Go on my website, and of course, download a copy of my book, Be the Cause: Healing Human Disconnect. So if there are no more questions in the chat room, I want to thank everyone for listening and connecting. And the more you know, the less vulnerable you're going to be to being at the effect of this narcissistic abuse. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.